Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're mapping out the entire journey of artificial intelligence, charting a course from the tools we're all using right now, all the way to the technologies that are poised to completely define our future.
Okay, so to really understand where all this is heading, you need a map. So let's lay out the entire ascent, from the base camp of today's AI to the, well, speculative peaks of what's to come.
All right, here it is, our six-stage roadmap. Now you should think of each step less like a simple software update and more like a fundamental revolution in what AI can do, how it reasons, and just how much it can act on its own. So our journey has to start with where we are right now, in this era of specialists and what we're calling generalists. Let's dig into how we got from AIs that could really only do one thing to the incredibly powerful, multi-talented models we're all seeing today. So the first huge leap was from specialists to generalist tools. I mean, just think about the difference between Siri, which is brilliant at a few specific tasks, and something like GPT-4, which can write you a poem, debug your code, and analyze a photograph. That massive jump is the leap from Gen 1 to Gen 2, and it's the frontier we're all living on right now.
So, with all this power, what's the catch? What's holding today's AI back? Well, it really comes down to these fundamental gaps. They don't have a persistent memory, they don't form their own goals or motivations, and they can still get pretty tripped up by basic cause and effect. This is basically the wall we need to climb to get to that next generation.
And getting over that wall, that brings us to the big one, the milestone that everyone is talking about, artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And this isn't just another step up, it represents a complete paradigm shift in what intelligence even means. But you know, before we hit full-blown AGI, there's probably an intermediate step. People are starting to call them reasoning agents. Imagine giving an AI a high-level command like, launch my new online business, and it just does it. It creates the plan, executes all the steps, and solves problems as they pop up, with very little help from you.
So what is AGI, really? The simplest way to think about it is an AI that can learn and reason across pretty much any domain that a human can. It's not about being a world-class expert at just one thing. It's about having the ability to figure anything out. To put that in perspective, the AI we have today is like a chess grandmaster. Absolutely brilliant, maybe the best in the world, but they only know how to play chess. An AGI, on the other hand, is a true generalist. It could take the strategic thinking it learned from chess and then turn around and apply that same logic to running a business, discovering a new scientific principle, or composing a symphony. It's a completely different kind of intelligence. So what are the key ingredients to actually get to AGI? Well, you need abilities like transfer learning, which is just a fancy way of saying it can apply skills from one area to a totally new one. You need autonomous reasoning, the power to form its own plans and pursue its own goals. And a big one is robustness, meaning it doesn't just crash and burn when faced with something it has never seen before. And let's be super clear about something. AGI is not just a more powerful version of ChatGPT. It's not a marketing buzzword that companies are going to slap on their next product. It's a fundamentally new kind of intelligence, and no matter what you might hear, we have not achieved it yet. Okay, but let's imagine for a second we get there. We achieve AGI. Is that the end of the road? Oh no, the roadmap does not stop there. In fact, this is where things start to get, well, a little sci-fi and kind of hard to wrap your head around.
The very next step past AGI is what we call superintelligence, or ASI. This isn't just an AI that's as smart as a human. We're talking about an intelligence that could surpass the most brilliant minds in history, thinking and reasoning at speeds we can't even begin to comprehend. On one hand, an ASI could potentially solve some of humanity's oldest and biggest challenges, from curing diseases to designing revolutionary new materials. But on the other hand, and this is a huge other hand, it raises these profound, maybe even terrifying questions about safety and control. How do you align a system that's orders of magnitude smarter than you are? The final, most speculative stage on our entire map is something called collective intelligence. This is the idea of a whole network of AGIs and ASIs working together at a planetary scale, managing incredibly complex systems like the global economy or the Earth's climate, free from all the errors and bottlenecks we humans introduce. You know, if you want an analogy for that kind of leap, think about the transition from a single neuron to a fully formed conscious human brain. That is the kind of jump in complexity and capability that we are talking about. It's a truly staggering concept. Okay, so after that wild journey into the far future, let's pull it all the way back to today. Because right now, there is a very real, very high stakes race to build the world's first AGI. So, who's actually in the running, what's their strategy, and who is going to end up holding all the power?
Yeah, this race for AI, it's not exactly a crowded field. It's really dominated by a handful of players with the insane resources, the compute, the data, the talent to even compete. Right now, the clear frontrunners are OpenAI, backed by Microsoft, with Google DeepMind and Anthropic right there on their heels.
And what's really interesting is that each of these contenders has a unique playbook. OpenAI and Microsoft are leveraging their massive budgets and their dominance in enterprise cloud, which means AGI might show up in our workplaces first. Google has its deep research legacy and a global ecosystem of products, meaning it could just be embedded everywhere. And then you have Anthropic, making a really strong play on AI safety, positioning itself for those high-stakes, regulated industries.
So who's not in this race? Well, with training costs soaring into the billions of dollars, most startups and even open source communities are pretty much priced out of the game. This suggests that the first AGI won't be like an app you can just download. It's almost certainly going to be a tightly controlled technology, likely regulated by governments.
This means the future of AGI probably won't look like the smartphone market, with thousands of different options. It's far more likely to resemble our power grid, a critical piece of infrastructure controlled by a very small number of heavily regulated players.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. As this technology becomes more powerful, the conversation shifts from what can it do to who gets to decide. If AGI is the new power grid, then who controls the switch? That is the question that will define our future.